I'd like to begin a series of discussions on a book that I think is fascinating. It's called Undoing the Knots by Maureen O'Connell. Maureen is a teacher on the college level, and she kind of probes a little bit about her own experience as a person dealing with racism in society today. And I think it's interesting to kind of take a look at her experience and maybe reflect and relate it to some of things that we go through as we struggle with this idea of, well, what is racism? Am I a racist? Am I not a racist? What are some of the substances behind these issues of racism? Green was born in 1973 in Philadelphia, so her experience is going to reflect a lot on the Philadelphia area and different things that happened there in that area. She claims that with the help of priests and the endorsement of the Archbishop, Philadelphia maintained racialized neighborhood boundaries. That was her experience of Philadelphia growing up. And she says, really, this idea of these racialized neighborhoods were really kind of strengthened in some ways, supported um, by priests, by the Archbishop of Philadelphia, several of them. She's going to go back in history. And really, this whole system of us being separated by race, uh, this has a lot to do with the church organizations, and the church kind of endorsed this in a way, and probably not in a way that the church said, let's deliberately do this, but this is what really happened in terms of the actuality on the ground. She mentions the incident in Philadelphia. Starbucks is kind of an example of this. And what happened is two African American gentlemen wanted to meet in Starbucks to have a discussion, and they were asked to leave, and it became kind of the idea of, well, were they being just targeted because they were black, and there was some presumption that they were up to no good. Whereas they just wanted to meet and talk and discuss, which a lot of people do in Starbucks. It's nothing new. This incident got kind of national attention, and she says, this is kind of fairly reflective of what the experience in Philadelphia is like. That if you are of a certain race, you can be targeted, you can be put down, you can be discriminated against. She also mentions the June 1st, 2020 incident where tear gas was used on demonstrators, and these were people who were demonstrating after the death of George Floyd, and they were demonstrating peacefully. And unfortunately, tear gas was used on them. And her point is, well, why did people do this? Why, the people were just marching against something that was an outrage. They had every right to do that. Why was tear gas being used on them? The spring of 2017, she relates her own experience. Her church, a fairly progressive church into social justice, really wanted to deal with this whole issue of racism. And so they wanted to put up a Black Lives Matter banner to support the Black Lives Matter movement and to say to people, well, this is something that we should look into. Black lives do matter. Of course, all lives matter, but they were particularly wanted to emphasize the idea that there has been discrimination and we have to look at it and move beyond it and rectify it. And so perhaps by putting up this banner, we could, you know, endorse that concept. Uh, One of the gentlemen on the parish council, when they were discussing this fellow Chris, who was himself African American, raised some questions about that. And he was saying, well, why are you doing this? What's your rationale? Uh, what's your feeling in terms of putting that up? Is that going to alienate people in the community? Uh, is it going to be helpful in any way? What's your strategy in putting this banner up? Uh, And Maureen and some of the others were sort of taken aback by that, saying, we just really wanted to do something that we thought was good and helpful, but yet he was raising some very important questions for us that we hadn't really addressed and talked about. And so it led to a very good discussion about racism and about their own feelings. And she got to be thinking about that, saying, maybe I have to look into my own history and this knot of racism that can really paralyze us, can really limit us in many ways. And it can be things that we're just not aware of. And so because Chris raised these questions, she started to think, well, maybe I should look at my own actions. She talked about the idea of the color line. Why is it that certain neighborhoods, as she looked around, why were they exclusively black, others white, others Hispanic? Why are there these color lines in the area that I live? How did this happen? Why is this still present, that we're so separated? There's been a civil rights movement. There's been this push for fair housing and fair jobs and education and all these good things to help people. But still, as she said, when you look around, we're very separated into these different neighborhoods, into these different areas. We don't communicate that much with one another. We tend to be kind of isolated. Why is that so? Why haven't we made more progress? Are we too accepting of this? So it got her thinking, and I think all of us can relate to that in a way that we look around and we say, of course, there has been progress made, and that's wonderful, that's great. But then we see these other patterns, and we look at it and say, well, has there been a lot of progress made? Or are there still areas that we need to grow in? And why are we still so separated? Why isn't it more of an integrated society that we live in, unfortunately? And then she took a look at the idea of poverty in Philadelphia and why there was such a huge percentage of black people living in poverty. Why is this happening? And again, she was just kind of trying to unpack some of these questions as to why these things are happening. And is she contributing? Has her family contributed? Different people in society? Is the church contributing to this? What's going on with some of these issues? And she said that this area in Philadelphia, it's very segregated, and a lot of us can relate to it where we live, and we can ask the question: is my area very segregated? What about performances in school? Why are certain students not doing well in school? Why is it that certain schools don't have the resources that other schools have? That doesn't seem to be fair. Some schools have no problem with internet availability. They have no problem with students having access to computers and latest books, and other areas it doesn't seem to work that way. Some school buildings, seem to be in really great shape. Others in need of repair, and a lot of times it's in a certain neighborhood, and we say, well, why is this happening? Shouldn't things be a little bit more equitable? So in the book, Maureen is going to unpack some of these ideas. And as we journey through it, we can take a look at that and apply it to ourselves, the areas where we live, and what's happening in our own localities and in our own lives.